Lost media. When people think lost media, what they tend to think is a commercial they saw back in the day that doesn't seem to exist anymore, or an episode of a TV show they love that you can't find anywhere. And despite that is all true, lost media also goes into the realm of cars. But how did something like a car become lost media? Usually it's a case of the car is shown off, the car gets some publicity, and then it vanishes. No one knows where it is, no one talks about it, it's like it never existed. And today we're going to look at 6 cars within lost media, and we're going to get right into it. On December 11th, 2007, Mazda released a teaser photo of a supercar they had in the works, later debuting it at the Detroit Auto Show in 2008 as the Mazda Fury. The Mazda Fury was a breathtaking supercar based on the Ford Rolex race car. Unlike the Ford, it was running on an ethanol 3-rotor making over 460 horsepower. Fury's main purpose in life was to be an art piece. It was made to be beautiful. In its life, it got into video games, it got into pop culture, and it stole a lot of people's hearts just due to how gorgeous this thing was. And then we just stopped hearing about it, like it never existed. So what happened? In 2013, Top Gear released an article on their review of the Mazda Fury, a review that took place in August 2008. This was kind of the first time we heard of the Mazda Fury since 2008, so it's kind of a big deal. What was unfortunate about it was the car was destroyed. During the review of the Mazda Fury, the Mazda actually burst into flames midway through, which proceeded to the car burning down to the ground. This was the only Mazda Fury in existence. Mazda did not build a second one, and they haven't built a replacement since, meaning the Mazda Fury no longer exists. And now the only way to actually go see the Mazda Fury is by playing old video games. If I say the name Pagani, there are certain cars that come to mind. Cars like the Zonda, the Huayra, and more recently the Utopia. But as some of you may know, the creator of Pagani was Horacio Pagani. Before he started work on the Zonda in the 1990s, he actually worked for Lamborghini. And the first car he ever worked on with Lamborghini was back in 1987, and it was a LP 5000 QV Lamborghini Countach. And what he made was a technical masterpiece. The car ended up being called the Countach Evolutionare, which, if I pronounce it wrong, we're going to just refer to it as the Evo here on out. So the main kind of party piece of Pagani's Countach was the body itself. Pagani used a lot of very light honeycomb aluminum along with a lot of carbon fiber on the Countach, reducing the weight from a bit over 3,300 pounds to 2,200 pounds, cutting nearly 1,200 pounds off the Countach body, which is unbelievably impressive. But it wasn't just weight. With the Evo, they're also working on things like all-wheel drive. They're working on things like anti-lock brakes. They're working on a system to lift the front end, give the front end a bit more clearance when you're going into parking lots or speed bumps. They even increased the horsepower, nearly 500 horsepower. All things we're going to eventually see on the Lamborghini Diablo, which is just coming in a few years. This thing was truly incredible, but unfortunately, it no longer exists. Despite the Evo was a truly incredible car, it was also just a test mule. Meaning as a car, it wasn't really worth that much to Lamborghini. It wasn't like this was the first Diablo or the first Mira. It wasn't this crazy concept car. It was just a test mule. So what's actually documented is that this car was destroyed during a crash test. Now, despite that it's documented, that's what happened. I don't think that's the whole story. You see, in the late 1980s, Lamborghini was broke. The idea they would have put all this really expensive carbon fiber and the honeycomb and all that into this car and then crash it doesn't fully add up to me. Truthfully, I think the parts still exist. I think all the carbon fiber parts for this car still exist somewhere. I don't think they're destroyed, but the car that was, the Countach Evo, is gone. If I say the word Vector, a lot of you probably thought of the box cereal. But in the 1990s, Vector was kind of this oddball American supercar brand that was really there to take out everyone else. At least that was the goal with Gerald Wagoner running it. When Megatech took over Vector via hostile takeover in the 1990s, they did actually have a lot of plans on what to do with Vector. The main goal was to make Vector profitable. Crazy, right? Now, the first car they made was the Vector M12, which has very mixed reception. Using the chassis of the Vector M12, they wanted to build something that's a bit more usable and completely insane. And that was the Vector M8 Lifestyle. Now, I've done an entire video on this car. I think this is the weirdest car ever built. But nonetheless, it needs to be brought up here. You see, a little while ago, a bunch of photos and documents came out on Vector and future Vector plans during Megatech's era on what they're going to be building during the 1990s going into the early 2000s. And one of the cars they had planned was the M8 Lifestyle. Now, the M8 Lifestyle was essentially a Vector M12, but powered by a Chevy small block attached to a Porsche 911 transaxle. It was also going to be a convertible ute with ground clearance, which none of that makes any sense at all. Now, it is known and it is documented that Vector did start working on this car. This car was meant to be made. But all we have is the photos of Vector actually just working on the car. There was never a finished product of this car, which makes it completely debatable whether this is even lost media or not. But nonetheless, what happened? Well, here's my theory. After the time Vector would have been working on the M8, one of the cars they actually showed off was the SR-V8. Built on the M12 platform, but using Nissan headlights, funny enough, a Chevy small block V8, and a lot of parts from the Vector M12 LM. Why is this relevant? I've always wondered why they put a naturally aspirated Chevy small block in this car, supposed to a Diablo V12. Because yes, this thing definitely would have been lighter than M12, but they still cut off nearly 200 horsepower, which never made sense to me. Well, much like Lamborghini in the late 80s, Vector was broke in the late 90s. So, you have no money, but hey, you have this Chevy small block and a Porsche transaxle kicking around for another car. I believe that's where that came from, and I believe a lot of the parts that was gonna be the M8 ended up turning into the SR-V8. If there's any Vector fanatics watching this video, I'd love to know your take on that. That's something I kind of came up with before filming this, but I want to know your thoughts on that. Nonetheless, the Vector M8 no longer exists, but I think a lot of its heart and soul went into the SR-V8. The Mazda RX8, one of the less loved RX Mazdas. But despite it was less loved, it ended up kind of going down as a kind of cool sports car from Mazda, and also an excellent handling, fun car. I bring this up because there's a lot of debate on whether this actually happened or not. I'm going to talk about the Mazda RX8 Mazdaspeed. So in 2004, Mazda showed off the Mazda RX8 Mazdaspeed, a Mazdaspeed tuned RX8. More power, better suspension, and a Mazdaspeed body kit on it. There's a lot of rumors and theories towards how many were made. I've heard some people say there's 180, I've heard some people say there's 300, I've heard some people say there's 450. And they're all recalled and nobody has one anymore. The reality is, Mazda never actually built one for the general public. They made some concept cars, but it never made it to production. The reality is no one's seen the concept car for a very long time, so its whereabouts are completely unknown. But as for the production theories on it, they were never true. This thing's purpose of existence was to show off Mazdaspeed parts for the RX-8. Which are now very difficult to get your hands on. Now, if you go look for it, you will find photos of people who have made their own Mazdaspeed RX-8 replicas through the parts they were able to get. But as for the Mazda RX-8 Mazdaspeed, its status is unknown. In the mid-1990s, Plug-in America was making a push for plug-in EV cars being sold in America. A lot of companies took part in this, whether they're prototype one-offs or things that actually were sold to the general public. Companies like Ford, Honda, and Geo all took part actually building these things. But another company that took part in it was General Motors, making the only car that has a General Motors badge as their main badge on the car, the General Motors EV1. This thing was one of the best and most unique versions of the Plug-in America cars. It also kind of has one of the most weird stories to it. You see, over the course of 3 production years, GM actually built 1,117 EV1s, but you could only lease them. And when the lease was done, they all had to go back to General Motors. And with this big push for Plug-in America and this whole thing for wanting EVs on the road, all the EVs General Motors made for this were taken back and crushed, making it so there's no General Motors EV1s left. Except there was. You see, for a lot of the cars that made a few, there's usually some crammed into museums here and there. But after around 15 years later, there was a sighting of one General Motors EV1 in a multi-level parking garage in Atlanta. Now, at first, nobody said where the car was, just to make sure that it didn't get crushed and it could actually kind of live there. And as this came out, more YouTubers went to go look at it, and as more YouTubers went to go look at it, their location was revealed, and the car was scooped up. Now, after it was scooped up, I actually believe it went to a university, so it could be taken apart and the students could actually learn how this thing worked. Now, truthfully, I don't actually know its current status. But another one was actually found on Google Maps. It was sitting at the side of someone's house, and it's probably been there at that point for like 20 years. Now, what's incredible about this was, as of 2003, the EV1 project was done and all of them were presumed crushed. But every now and then, one sort of pops up, crammed away somewhere, because someone tried to save it. So for like 15-ish years, this car was lost media, but it's kind of neat knowing that a couple survived. Honda has a history of making super cool cars. The Type Rs, the S2000s, the Del Sol, the NSX. And as of 2006, Honda was actually in the works of making a brand new NSX. This took 11 years before it actually made production, and it had multiple variations of what it was supposed to be. The most interesting and unique version, though, was the one they were working on in 2008. Now, its name was the HSV10, but it was being made to be a new NSX. All-wheel drive V10, and it did like a mid 7-minute run around the Nürburgring, completely untuned and untested. First run. This thing was truly incredible. It looked amazing, and it was like what the LFA wanted to be 5 years before the LFA even came out. Now, despite Honda did start testing this car in 2007, 2008, word didn't really get out about it until 2010, 2011. What we've kind of heard was Honda decided that being all-wheel drive and V10 and front engine, it wasn't an NSX, and they couldn't really market it as an NSX. And the HSV10 name didn't really have that much draw with the market itself. So it was scrapped, they restarted, and they eventually made what we got in 2017. But the HSV10 concept car that we saw go around the Nürburgring in 2008 hasn't been seen since then. Its status is completely unknown. It wouldn't be too crazy to think that it was parted out and used as a test mule, but test mule for what? It had its own unique body, the engine hasn't been used in anything, so like, where is this car? Presumably, it's crammed into a back lot somewhere in Honda's test development facility somewhere in the world. But that's it. I have to make up all those words because nobody knows the status of this car. If you don't know where it is, it's unlikely to be destroyed, so at this moment, it's lost. But that was 6 cars in the realm of lost media. I want to know, what do you think? Did you like this video concept? If so, I'll do more. And were there any cars that kind of surprised you on the list? And if you know anything about these cars, their whereabouts, or any just neat details that I may have missed, let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. Like, subscribe, enjoyed if you've seen. I tend to post a few times a week, and I'll see you later.